Hey, my name's Jason Troyer. I'm a former professor, someone who started some side businesses and eventually became self-employed. I tend to get a lot of questions about that, so I thought I'd create a short video that would give you a brief overview of my journey and how I make money as someone who's self-employed and a former academic. I've been self-employed since 2018. Probably the most common question I either get or it seems like people want to ask me in one a polite way or another is how much money do I make? And so what I can say is that I probably make, I know or I have a really good idea of what I would be making now if I was still in my academic position, and I probably make around twice as much as that. There are four specific ways that I earn money. Although I am a counseling psychologist, I don't see clients as a way to do that. So I'll cover all four different ways and give you a percentage of how much of my take-home pay is from each of those four ways. Like I mentioned, I'm a counseling psychologist by training. I was a professor at a small liberal arts college in East Tennessee from 2004 to 2018. I did achieve associate professor status. I did receive tenure there. For a while, I was a part-time assistant dean of academics as we looked at trying to improve retention and the first year experience like many small colleges are focused on. I started doing side businesses in probably around 2009. I really started focusing on them in around 2014. It took me about 4 years for me to build up the side businesses to the point where I felt like if I went full-time that I could replace my income. And so one thing I always like to mention, I loved my institution. I loved my colleagues. I enjoyed the vast majority of the students. Honestly, if small colleges could pay well, I probably would still be there and maybe doing a side business just because it's fun, but I wouldn't have left the position. But unfortunately, it started out of desperation in a lot of ways. I was coming up for tenure in 2010, which is right in the midst of the Great Recession. Unfortunately, I had about 3 to 5 years where I did not get a raise, including when I received tenure that year. That next year, I did not get a single percentage point, a single dollar increase. And unfortunately, as our family went from 2 to 4, that just wasn't something that was sustainable. So out of desperation, I really had to look to side businesses, creating something. A quick note, I talk about side businesses. I always want to be in complete control of what I do. Side businesses are tough because it's all on you, whether or not you have to find clients, you have to figure out what the service is going to be, you have to figure it all out. Having said that, the big benefit of a side business is that you reap all the rewards that you create, and it's all up to you. You decide how much you charge, you decide who you work with, you decide what you do and when it happens, all those sorts of things. Now, that's different than a side job. I'm not opposed to side jobs. In fact, if you need money quickly, a side job is probably a better way to go. But just understand you're always going to be working for someone else, and there's a trade-off there where they get to call the shots. And so it's just a difference of what you're looking for and what your needs are. My first side business, this isn't something that I do now, but I think perhaps it's instructive to look at kind of just my first foray into a side business territory. Like many small college professors and folks who need extra money, I was always looking to teach summer classes for additional pay. It just really was something that we needed. Unfortunately, being at a small college and with a large college, about 20 minutes away, my summer classes didn't always make. I wasn't always getting paid the full amount for them because they just wouldn't meet the minimum number of students. And so I wanted some way to feel like I had more control over that. And by happenstance, I also started to notice that I had some really strong students who were not doing well on the GRE. So these were not just psychology students, but students primarily, honestly, from humanities and various social sciences who were strong students in my classroom, but for some reason, whether it's some version of fear of math or math phobic or those sorts of things, really were struggling with the quantitative portion. And this has likely changed in the past. A lot of graduate schools have moved away from the GRE, but 15 years ago, the GRE was just often required for almost anyone. I had students who were looking at social work programs, counseling programs, clinical psych programs, and all of the vast majority of them at the time were requiring the GRE, and the quantitative score just seemed to be really out of whack with what I knew the students' abilities were. And so I started by actually offering a free class and no one would show up. And then I eventually turned that into, I just knew that students, my advisees would tell me they were going down the street, probably 20, 30 miles down the road to pay $1,200, $1,400 for one of those standardized test prep places and get 20 hours of instruction there. And I thought, well, if I had X number of students and I charged them even half that price, if I could create my own program, I could offer it, in town, maybe even at the institution, at the college, and that might be something that would be consistent. It would be helping the students get into grad school. It would be something that was under my control that I could figure out. And so I did that for several years. It was I think, a reasonably successful business. It was always tricky trying to get students to kind of agree on. I would do them in an intensive weekend, kind of Friday night, all day Saturday, Sunday afternoon, Monday night. And it was difficult to that weekend was rough to kind of fit 20 hours of instruction into those 4 days. But I think it provided the students a really great service. It was additional income for me. I set the price so that it was a great deal for the students compared to the test prep companies that they might have gone to. And so that was just my first opportunity, and just kind of like, I see a problem, I just try to figure it out in a way that helps whoever is paying the bills. And I thought, well, maybe I can do more of this. So like I mentioned, from about 2014 to 2018, when I resigned, I started building up a variety of different side businesses. One thing to know about me is that my area of expertise is grief and loss. And so it was a natural fit for me to begin to use that. And actually some dumb luck at the beginning, partnering with some local businesses. And so what I have focused on over time is to provide that service mostly to help businesses who are serving bereaved people. And my most typical model, as you'll see over the next couple of slides, is that I sell a service or product to a business who then gives it to a bereaved person as a way to improve the quality of their service, to attract their attention, those sorts of things. So I'm very hesitant and concerned about, I don't think it, I think it's perfectly reasonable to sell things like therapy and services to bereaved people. I'm also very cautious about that, making sure I'm not taking advantage of a bereaved person. And I really like the model where I sell a service to a business at a set price, and then they can give that away as part of their service. So probably over half of my income comes from me creating social content and informational content that is used on social media for businesses, and specifically businesses in the death care space or end of life space. So this would be funeral homes, cemeteries, occasionally some hospices. And this was probably one of my second or one of my early things that I tried. I create the content, and then I also take care of publishing it for them on their social media accounts. The one big thing I learned from this was I initially thought that businesses wouldn't want to pay for me to post it for them, that they would just pay for me to teach them how to create it on their own or sell them the content, and then they would post it on their own. And I finally had a business owner who I'd gotten to know, and we had become more than acquaintances, not quite friends, but more than acquaintances. He could be really honest with me. And I said, well, I'm going to create this, I'm going to give it to you, and then you post it. And I'll never forget, he told me, he said, Jason, if you would just go ahead and post it for me, I'll pay you double. And I was like, oh, that was my first example of seeing something where if you do all of the service for them, if they don't have to do anything and it's something that they value, they will pay you for it. They will pay you more for it. And so I came from a world of academia, both academia and then our household finances, where I was just, where the rule is frugality. You're always cutting, you're always looking for the cheapest way to do things. And I had to learn that most businesses certainly need to be profitable and certainly aren't just spending money willy-nilly, But if they see value there, they're used to spending money. They're used to having vendors and partners and other people that provide a service to them so that they can focus on their primary service. Their primary service isn't, especially as a small business, they didn't want to be focusing on social media content and creating that. They've got more important things to do that are mission critical for them. And so that was a really powerful lesson for me to learn in that situation. So probably more than half of my income comes from. I work with about 100 businesses in this space, and so the great thing about that, just as a related side note, I think a lot of times people will think, well, you had a tenured position, you had a job for life, so to speak, although that's not really true. Um, and so it's so risky to become self-employed. Well, what happened was as I found a service that people were willing to pay for, and I built up a client roster. I've had over 100 clients there. So let's say I have 100 clients. Well, if I lose one of them, that's 1% of my business. That doesn't hurt very much. And certainly I have to pay attention to large scale trends, and there are some large scale trends and changes in the social media space, and I really need to pay attention to those. But the idea that your world is so risky, honestly, these days I would be far more concerned, or at least as concerned, if I was working for an institution that I knew was having some financial troubles. There's a small college that is near where I live now that just went on probation for purely for financial reasons. They're at risk of losing accreditation because the finances don't look good. And so when you have one paycheck, all it takes is for one institution, one boss, one dean, one scandal to ruin that institution, or maybe you're targeted for one reason or another. And it's, being a professor is not as safe as you might think it is, or as commonly viewed. And so I've got 4 ways that I make money, and this one out of the 4, I've got 100 clients, and they're not all going to fire me at the same time unless I do something absolutely egregious. And so it doesn't have to be as risky as you might think it is. So that's one thing that I do. Another thing that I think surprises a lot of people is that I make a significant amount of income from selling very short booklets on very targeted topics. Again, what I do is I create grief-related content, and then I, in most cases, sell that to a business, and in some cases, some large clients that buy lots of those and then give them away. In the bottom middle of the screen, you'll see the Counseling Widowers book. I do have a traditionally published research book, and I published that about 10 years ago. I likely have made less than $1,000 in royalties off of that. I make more than $1,000 in royalties off of a single booklet order from one of my larger clients. They're 8 pages. It took me, most of them take me a couple of days to write. I get a professional graphic designer to help me design them, and then I can handle the ordering and order fulfillment on my own. And there is something to be said for something that is very, very targeted to a specific problem. One thing I preach, and I've got this in another video where I talk about the 6 different business models. What you really want to do, and I can't preach this enough, is ideally you want to find a client who needs something that you can create, whether that's a booklet, a video, a white paper, or whatever it is. Find somebody who has a need, find a way, something within the expertise that you have, and then get it so that that they want to order that from you. Design it so that you're happy with it, and you're not, obviously you don't want to sell out, so that you feel good about the content that it's there, but also matches what they need, and then sell the content to them. That's very different than what most of us do, and quite honestly what I did at the beginning, which is try to create something and then find a buyer. When I spent 2 years on my academic book, and then I really haven't worked at finding buyers, and I haven't really promoted it very much, but there's probably not a huge market there. Instead, find the market and then create the product, knowing that you'll already be able to sell it. So booklets is a big part of what I do. And my first version of the booklet was 36 pages. They're now 8 pages long. I thought I would never be able to write something that short and still get in all the content that I wanted. But now I understand why people read my booklets and what their purpose is. And 8 pages is perfectly fine. In fact, I get more readers who read my booklets, far more readers that read my booklets than a full-length book, or even a short full-length book. So Booklets has been something where I feel like I'm contributing my content and my expertise is getting out there to help people in a real way. That wasn't happening with my research booklets and my research presentations and things like that. My third source of income is while I don't see individual clients, I have been a therapist in the past. I have worked with clients. I didn't want to go down that route. I didn't want to kind of create a caseload where I was just for me that just wasn't attractive and what I wanted to do. So what I did instead was more of an online grief program or online grief course that is self-paced. It's about 65 videos. Each video is about 5 to 7 minutes long. It focuses on a specific topic. And I made the same mistake I just said not to do, which is I created it and then hoped to sell it to people. And what I did was just put it out there for the general public. That is only about 2% of this 15%, only about 2% is to individual people. Most of that comes from what I've done is partner with a website company that works with funeral homes and cemeteries. And I say, we'll put the program on your website so that anyone who uses your service or anyone in your community can just use it for free. People don't have to register for it. I don't take payments from them. And then that company pays me a flat fee each year for the right to have it on their website. And then they just give it away to anybody who wants it. You could likely search Grief Plan and Funeral Home and find the program right now. Again, I really love that model in not having to turn anyone away in terms of the bereaved person, but it provides a valuable service for that end-of-life business. It allows them to provide better service without taking their staff time. It's kind of a true win-win-win sort of situation there. The fourth thing that I do that maybe I guess out of the four earns me the least, but also is one of the most gratifying and helpful things that I do is speak in various ways. I do a lot of continuing education programs. I do a lot of trainings and some events, given what I talk about. If someone is doing I had an end-of-life business, a funeral home wanted to do kind of a service, kind of as COVID was wrapping up, kind of a community-wide memorial service, and they needed a speaker. They wanted somebody who maybe wasn't affiliated with one specific faith community, so they brought me in. I do training for end-of-life professionals so that they're up to date on modern grief information and how they can use that to help the families that they serve. And anybody who's licensed, and in my case, that happens to be funeral directors are licensed, as well as a lot of hospice professionals, nurses, social workers, and other folks. I do a lot of continuing education programs. I think I'm up to 33 states that I've presented at in the last 10 years. While I don't make as much money, and I've made everything from occasionally certain situations I do it for free because it is great marketing. There are people in the room who want to buy my other services, and so occasionally I will do that. More likely I tend to be in the kind of, depending on how long it is and how big the event is and things like that, it might be in the $700 to $2,000 range is typically what I would do for a 1 to 3 hours of speaking. That always includes them paying for my travel and my lodging and those sorts of things. I have made high four figures on occasionally on some speaking gigs and trainings, just depending on the situation. But one of the great things about speaking, about having a side business, and specifically about speaking, is that it really is an opportunity. You see some pictures here. I did have an opportunity to do some trainings for a multi-generational funeral business in the UK, and so my wife jumped on the opportunity to tag along with that. The other two pictures there, you've got me presenting and then a beach photo. Just within the last month, I presented at Virginia Beach, so I had to present for a couple of hours, but then the family decided to come along and share the hotel room, and so we've got a family vacation out of it. It doesn't always work out that way, but certainly it's not uncommon for it to work out that way. Probably about 25% of the time when I speak, I'm taking at least one member of the family along as kind of a mini vacation, so to speak. But what I've learned along the way is that certainly side businesses are possible. I think it is incredibly gratifying. And one reason why I think almost all professors should have a side business, whether they need the income or not, is that it is such a wonderful opportunity to share your expertise with other audiences. And I don't know about you and your situation, but when I was at a small college, and again, I had great colleagues that I loved, a chair that I really appreciated and really valued, the whole department and those sorts of things. I can't say enough kind things, good things about the situation I was in other than the income. But I was often surrounded by 80 PhDs. We would still have faculty meetings and everyone would be in the same room. And you just start to think, you start to feel like everyone has advanced training and everyone has a PhD. Now I'm in a situation where I might be presenting to 400 people. I'm the only PhD in the room, and I've built up some expertise within these niches where they value that expertise and they want to take me out for a nice dinner and they want my opinion, and they'll in trade journals and things like that, they'll publish almost any article I write in those situations. And it's really gratifying to be able to take that information that maybe feels a little bit too bottled up and share it with various people who would really gain a lot of benefit from it. And so that's been really gratifying. The travel's been nice. The flexibility. We have moved away from East Tennessee because now I am location independent. So side businesses are possible. Now, it is a completely different step to go to self-employment. There are some significant differences there. I worked really hard at getting to the level where I could resign. I had some lucky breaks. I have some long-term clients that really make that possible, and that's probably not necessarily the case for everybody. But I didn't start off doing my side businesses thinking that that was possible. So you just never know. The first step is to start with one presentation, one project, one opportunity, help one person, and then see if you can do it again. See if there's other people who have that problem, or people who have other people like them, those sorts of things. So don't aim for self-employment is what I would advise. Aim for starting a side business, having some type of service that people will pay for, and then seeing where it can go and how you might modify that. I tell people I've had probably 7 or 8 ideas that have made money along the way, and obviously some of those I've stopped doing because they're not as profitable. They're not the best use of my time. I've probably had 20 ideas that didn't work out. And so if you're looking at aiming for more like self-employment, you have to get used to the idea you're going to try some things and they're going to fail. And the trick there is to try some things in a way, test them out as cheaply and quickly as possible, so that if they're not working, you can shift away from them and shift into something else. But that's just part of the process. There's no big sales pitch here. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I am working on a book, tentatively titled Side Businesses for Professors. If you want to be notified, or if you might want to be a beta reader for that, you can check out my website at sidebusinessesforprofessors.com. At this moment in time, I'm not doing any coaching. I don't have a course or anything like that. The idea is that I'm working on a book, and I would be curious if you're really interested in those sorts of things and you want to be a beta reader, you can sign up on my email list on my website. Hope this has been helpful. Hope you check out the Side Businesses for Professors in case there's some resources that might be useful for you there. If you are looking to start a side business, just start doing something. Look for one person that you can help. Keep it small. Don't think about it too much, quite honestly. Don't worry too much if you're setting exactly the right price or those sorts of things. Just focus on helping people and seeing what you can do, and that's definitely the way to get started.